You're standing at the edge of a grass fire. Lightning just struck the dry brush ahead of you, and the flames are already spreading faster than you can run. Every instinct in your body says leave. For nearly 2 million years, one branch of your ancestors did the opposite. They walked toward it. Today you make fire with the flick of a lighter, a device smaller than your thumb. It took your ancestors most of human history just to learn how to keep a flame alive for a single night. Here's what the evidence actually shows. Deep inside Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, more than 30 meters from the entrance, archaeologists have found burnt animal bones dating back as far as 1.79 million years. That depth matters. Sunlight barely reaches that far into the cave, and a wildfire outside could never have touched those bones on its own. Something carried fire inside. A research team led by Dr. Leora Kolska-Horwitz of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem tested the bones using two separate methods. One detects heat damage using a special light. The other measures a faint reddish glow that only shows up in bone that's been exposed to flame. Both methods agreed. Every single bone tested from the oldest layer showed clear signs of burning. This wasn't one lucky accident. The burnt remains clustered together in specific spots over and over across an enormous span of time. That's not what randomness looks like. That's what routine looks like. To make sure they weren't looking at some trick of nature, the researchers tested their methods on bones from a much younger site in Spain, one where the burning history was already confirmed. The results matched perfectly. Whatever left that reddish glow in the Wonderwerk bones, it was fire, not rock, not chemistry, not coincidence. The early human most likely responsible is Homo erectus, an ancestor with a brain smaller than yours, no complex language as far as anyone can tell, and most importantly, no known ability to create fire from nothing, which raises an uncomfortable question. If they couldn't make fire, how did they use it for almost 2 million years? They stole it. Somewhere out on the African savanna, lightning struck dry grass, the same way it still does today. A wildfire started on its own, and instead of running from it, someone broke off a burning branch and carried it home. From there, the real skill began. You can't simply own a flame, you have to feed it constantly, shield it from wind, and protect it from rain, because if it goes out, you might not see another lightning strike for weeks or months. Losing your fire meant starting over from nothing. So keeping one alive took planning. It took someone paying attention to it at almost every hour, feeding it just enough fuel without smothering it, moving it, or covering it during a storm. Scientists once assumed this kind of forward thinking didn't exist until humans had much bigger brains. Wonderwerk Cave suggests otherwise. This isn't the only site pointing to early fire use. Sites in China, including Zhoukoudian, have produced ash layers and burnt bone that some researchers connect to Homo erectus populations living far from Africa. The dating there is still debated, and not every archaeologist accepts it as solid proof. But taken together with Wonderwerk, the pattern is hard to ignore. Wherever Homo erectus went, something that looks a lot like fire management seems to have gone with them. What did all that effort actually buy your ancestors? The obvious answers come first: warmth through cold nights, protection from predators that feared flame more than they feared a slow, poorly armed group of early humans. Extra hours of usable light after sunset, time that could go toward making tools or simply staying alert. But there's a deeper answer, and it comes from a Harvard researcher named Richard Wrangham. Wrangham has spent decades asking why the human brain grew so large so quickly. His answer, based on what he calls the cooking idea, is simple. It was cooking. Around the same window as the Wonderwerk Cave evidence, roughly 1.8 million years ago, Homo erectus shows up in the fossil record with a strikingly different body, a noticeably bigger brain, a smaller gut, weaker jaws, and smaller teeth than the ancestors before them. Those changes only make sense if the diet changed first. Raw food takes enormous energy to chew and digest. Cooked food doesn't. Heat breaks down tough fibers and unlocks calories a raw diet simply can't deliver as well. Wrangham's argument is that cooking freed up energy the body used to spend on digestion, and your ancestors' bodies redirected that spare energy somewhere else entirely, into the brain. Your brain is an expensive organ to run. Even now, it burns through roughly a quarter of your body's total energy, despite being a small fraction of your total body weight. You can't grow an organ that costly without finding the calories from somewhere. Cooking may be exactly where those calories came from. Not every archaeologist agrees on the exact timeline. Solid, undisputed evidence of true cooking fires only goes back reliably about 790,000 years, found at a site called Gesher Beno Yaakov in Israel, where researchers found fire remains concentrated in the same spots across an extremely long stretch of time. That's centuries of consistent behavior, not a single lucky ember. The gap between that confirmed cooking evidence and the body changes that show up in Homo erectus far earlier is exactly why fire remains one of the most debated topics in all of archaeology. But picture the scene anyway because it tells you something no fossil ever could. You're deep in the Ice Age and you're inside a cave. A small fire glows near the entrance, kept alive by someone whose entire job, day and night, is keeping it breathing. The light pushes back the darkness just far enough for you to see the edges of the group around you. Somewhere outside, something large is moving through the grass and it wants nothing to do with the flame. You're not just warm. You're safe in a way your ancestors, only a few generations earlier, never were. Someone in that circle has a job you wouldn't even recognize as a job today. They're the Firekeeper. Their task isn't glamorous. It's never remembered by name in any fossil record. But without them, the flame dies within hours, and everyone loses the warmth, the light, and the protection it provides. That person's constant, unglamorous attention is arguably one of the first specialized roles in human history, long before farming, long before writing, long before anyone thought to call it a job. Would your ancestors have survived those cold, predator-filled nights without that unnamed person quietly feeding the flame hour after hour? Almost certainly not, at least not in the same numbers, and not with the same odds. Here's the twist that should genuinely change how you think about this whole story. Your ancestors didn't invent fire. They captured something that already existed in nature and learned to keep it from dying. The actual ability to create fire on demand by rubbing wood or striking sparks from stone came much later, likely tens of thousands of years ago rather than millions. For most of the time your ancestors depended on fire, they weren't its inventors, they were its caretakers. Now think about your own life for a moment. You don't generate your own electricity, you don't build your own internet. You depend on systems you didn't create and mostly don't understand, and your entire modern comfort rests on someone somewhere, keeping them running without interruption. That dependence isn't new, it isn't even particularly modern. It's nearly 2 million years old. Think about the last time the power went out at your house. The panic of not knowing where the flashlight is, the strange helplessness of a kitchen you can't cook in, a phone you can't charge, a night suddenly much darker and much longer than you expected. For a few uncomfortable hours, you get a small taste of what your ancestors dealt with every single time their fire went out for good. The difference is that you can call someone, or wait for a repair crew, or simply drive somewhere with power. Your ancestors had none of those options. If the flame died and no lightning struck nearby for weeks, the group went back to cold nights, no cooked food, and far less protection from whatever was moving in the dark outside the cave. Every stove in your kitchen, every candle you've ever lit, every furnace keeping you warm tonight, all of it traces back to a moment when an early human looked at something the rest of the animal kingdom fled from and decided it was worth carrying home. You're standing at the edge of that same fire right now. You just don't have to run from it anymore.